as other Georgia resources for the aerospace industry. Mr. Justice brings to this role over 30 years diverse experience in the aerospace industry, including technical leadership of intra-company and inter-company teams. He participated in the development, certification, and support of numerous aircraft, including the Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor and the C-130J Hercules, as well as the Northrop B-2, the stealth bomber, and the Gulfstream of G-4 business jet. He is a former FAA designated engineering representative and is currently a licensed professional engineer in aerospace. Let's welcome R. Stephen Justice. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, welcome today. A little different. We're going to be talking about unmanned systems a little bit and agriculture. One of the things we're doing in the state of Georgia is looking at what are the next big things coming, and we think unmanned systems are one of the next big things in aviation. So I'm going to reprise a presentation we did in February of this year, without as much jet noise at that time, at our agricultural conference that we do in Georgia about unmanned systems. So let me start. Well, let's tell you a little bit about the Center of Innovation for Aerospace in Georgia. Our mission, in a nutshell, is to grow more aerospace jobs in the state of Georgia. So how do we do that? We take companies and connect them with new technologies that come out of the university research in our state, potential business collaborators, current industry information, whatever it takes to make those businesses more successful. And this applies also to the unmanned systems area. So why is this important? Why, as a state, are we very interested in what's going on in aerospace? Well, because it's a key industry for our state. It's about $51 billion a year in total economic impact to the state. That gets a lot of attention. It's about 10% of the tax revenues in our state. Our state leaders, that gets their attention as well. We're about 5% of the state's employment, 6% of the GDP, and that industry supports 1.7 jobs. So for every job we have in aerospace, another 1.7 jobs in the state. So it has a big impact across our entire state. We have three main sectors in the state of Georgia. The manufacturing sector, and we need to update this number. We were $6.75 billion in 2012. We rose up to $7.8 billion in international exports in 2013 numbers that just came out. We're ranked number 4 among U.S. states, and aerospace products are the #1 international export of the state of Georgia. So it's very important that we continue to grow that business. But we also have two other main sectors. You build the aircraft once. You operate and maintain it for 20, 30, if you're the Air Force, 50, 60, 70 years. There's a lot of revenue there. So our other areas are maintenance, repair, and overhaul, MRO. We have about 20,000 folks working on the civilian side of that. We're ranked number 3 in the United States. But in addition, we have a major United States Air Force air logistics complex in Warner Robins that has about 13,000 civilian employees taking care of United States Air Force aircraft. In air transportation, if you've ever been to Atlanta, you probably went through Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the busiest passenger airport in the world. They average about 250,000 people a day going through that airport. That's average. You should see at Christmas and Thanksgiving. But we have 103 other public airports in the state. And if you look at our 86,000 Georgians that work in the industry, it's roughly a third in each of these areas. So we have a very diverse industry in our state. So let's talk about unmanned aircraft systems. We started our efforts in this way back in 2009. We held a UAS leadership symposium, brought folks together from government, both the state and federal government, from academia, from the industry, to talk about the future that we saw in unmanned aircraft and what we as a state should be doing to get ready for that future. Following that, using one of the recommendations, we formed our UAS working group, a statewide committee made up of all those stakeholders. We meet quarterly, and that's chaired by Mr. Chad Dennis from Middle Georgia State College for us. And that group gets together, as I said, quarterly to talk about what's going on in unmanned aircraft systems and to make recommendations to us as a state at what things we need to do to help foster this new industry. And by the way, a lot of the people who are part of this group get together and do various projects together. AUVSI, the organization for unmanned aircraft in the industry has forecast that in the first 5 years after FAA rules allow commercial use of UAVs, be roughly 2,000 jobs added in Georgia with an economic impact of just about $380 million and about $4 million in tax revenues. Now, those aren't big numbers compared to the sectors that we already have, but I always remember that the largest private employer in the state of Georgia is Delta Airlines. They started 70 years ago as a crop dusting company. So who knows what unmanned aircraft company we have today might be that Delta Airlines-like companies 50, 60 years from now. So we have to grow those companies up and nurture them. And we see 3 key areas for unmanned aircraft systems in Georgia. Agriculture, we have a very large agriculture segment in the state of Georgia. Public safety, for a number of different uses there. And of course the military. We are one of the states that has a facility of all the major services. We have large Army bases, Air Force bases, and there's a lot of aviation activity that goes on. We have a lot of troops returning from the Middle East, and they're users of unmanned systems, and they want to be able to continue to train with those. So we have a lot of military UAS activity going on in our state. So over the past 4 years, we've had a large number of projects that we've been sponsoring at the state level to prepare us for this new environment, particularly in the agriculture area. We've been working with our universities, Georgia Tech, the Georgia Tech Research Institute, Middle Georgia State College, our main aviation school in the state of Georgia, to develop these new projects. We have industry involved, we have the universities involved, state governments involved through my center. And we've been looking at a number of different enabling technologies. In particular, we look at low-weight, high-strength composite structures. We think it's very important, especially for these vehicles. The flight testing element of that, and sense and avoid systems. We see that as a key for being able to have unmanned aircraft operating on a routine basis in the national airspace system, have to sense and avoid. We coordinated with our sister organization, the Center of Innovation for Agribusiness, in 2012 to start discussions on the project, focusing on the feasibility testing of small UAVs in a simulated or real farm environment to see what the usefulness of that would be. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our project we had in this last year. We started that in the last growing season, so this time last spring, we started a project. We had a small UAV that was developed by Guided Systems Technologies south of Atlanta, working with Middle Georgia State College. They're a holder of the certificate of authorization from the FAA. We had the University of Georgia involved and their agribusiness center in Tifton, Georgia, where we have test fields. And essentially what we did is we put a project together to fly small rotary wing UAVs over these test fields where we had very good knowledge of what was in the fields, the different treatments. We had all that ground truth, and we would image those fields various times through the growing season, once every couple of weeks or so, provide that imagery to the farmers, and they were going to make an assessment of how useful that imagery was. Could they see what was going on in the fields? Could they see where they needed the water, where they didn't have nitrogen, where they had pest infestations, things like that. So Middle Georgia State College was the lead for the air vehicle operations. UGA Tifton was the lead for all agricultural aspects of it. And as I said, Guided Systems Technology was our industry partner with this. So we did that project in the last growing season. And I have a small video that we can show to give you a sense of what was going on there. Let's see. I can get to that. UAVs are unmanned aerial vehicles. They're essentially an air vehicle where you do not have a person in it. It may be actively flown from the ground or have a computer system on board that allows it to fly autonomously.
Once you remove the pilot from the seat, you no longer have to size the aircraft to carry the pilot. You can simply size it to carry whatever it is you're interested in carrying. And if that's a small camera system, the aircraft can be very small.
which is part of the advantage of it. You could put it in the back of a pickup truck or back of a car.
No one really dreamed that the individual farmer might actually be able to own his own, simple camera system that can be programmed to fly over his crops weekly, even daily, at very low cost, and collect imagery of very high quality and use it to manage his crops.
Well, we're using these UAVs to take aerial digital photography of these plots and then translate that information back to the producer and identify what's the health of their crop.
All right, launching.
Is there water deficiencies? Is there nitrogen deficiencies, pest damage? And by doing that, that saves farmers from having to actually walk through that field and individually inspect every plant. Well, farmers have always been quick to adopt new technologies. With these new systems that we're seeing from Guided Systems Technologies, we're hopeful it's going to provide tremendous advantage for producers out in the field.
If you catch things early enough, it allows you to, for example, use a much smaller quantity of fertilizer, much smaller quantity of pesticide or fungicide, so it allows the farmer to improve his bottom line.
So while we have great knowledge of the aerospace component of this project, we had no contact or interaction with the agricultural community, in particular the research community in the university system in Georgia.
The Centers of Innovation has been instrumental in pulling all of these diverse components together to create the opportunity to demonstrate the potential of the technologies. But I think the most valuable thing are the connections they help to make.
We're very excited about this partnership between the Center of Innovation for Agribusiness and the Center of Innovation for Aerospace in working together.
We're seeing in Japan, they already use UAVs to spray their fields. South America is looking at this. Europe is looking at this. We want to be a leader in all those areas in terms of we want to be able to manufacture these vehicles here, but we also want to be the go-to place for people to come to learn how to operate these vehicles, the training of it. We want to have companies in Georgia be the leaders in operating these vehicles and providing those services, not just in Georgia, but throughout the Southeast, the nation, and maybe even internationally.
Without the center, I think we simply wouldn't really know where to begin.
Well, I hope the video gave you a sense of that project. This was funded by the Center of Innovation for Aerospace, the Center of Innovation for Agribusiness, the Georgia Peanut Commission, the Georgia Cotton Commission, and in-kind contributions from industry. So it really was a collaborative effort by all of those involved. So from that, we are continuing to expand the program that we have in unmanned systems. We're continuing to invest at the state level in this in terms of manpower, resources, and actual grants to many of these projects, but we're really looking at developing an ecosystem where we can be able to, as I said in the video, be able to have that A to Z environment where we design those vehicles, we build them, we operate them, maintain them from Georgia, and we provide those services. I made the allusion to Delta Airlines beginning as a crop duster 70 years ago. Agriculture, we think, is going to be a big area for the employment of unmanned systems. So at the state level, there are many things you have to do. It's not just the FAA and their rules. That's very important to have those federal rules to be able to guide us on how to operate these vehicles, how to certify these vehicles. But there is a lot more to that we have to do at the local and the state level to make sure that we have a robust commercial environment for the development and operation of these vehicles. The first one's in technology. Companies need technology. This is a technology-driven business at this point. In Georgia, we do about $500 million a year in sponsored university in our sponsored research in our university system, specifically in engineering, and about 10 to 12% of that is specifically in aerospace. Georgia Tech is actually the #1 aerospace research institution in the United States. And we're also, Georgia Tech and University of Georgia now has a joint initiative in unmanned systems and how to apply them to agribusiness, not just for aerial vehicles, but for ground vehicles as well, and how those vehicles can cooperate together. How can you use an aerial vehicle to have that eye in the sky looking down, helping to tell the tractor, which is also operating autonomously, where it should go, what things it should spray, what it should be doing. So how do we do that cooperative environment with air and ground vehicles? And capital is very important for small entrepreneurial companies to have access to capital. Most of these companies operating in the unmanned aircraft space are not the large companies, not the Boeings and the Lockheeds at this point. They need that capital to be able to continue. We've been sponsoring, just like on the project we showed you, innovation grants. The innovation grants make it easy for companies to work with our university system. It's a grant to a unit of our university system to work with a company on a specific project like this one, to be able to then do that technology transfer from the lab out into the industry. We also have our new Invest Georgia Fund. It's a state-operated venture capital fund. The legislature set that up and have funded that for small startup businesses and growing businesses. And we're looking at some of the large agricultural OEMs and how they could play in this environment. We know the companies that are already in that business, they're going to be purveyors of this equipment at some point. So how do we connect them in with this? They're already doing precision ground vehicles. What's their interest in precision air vehicles, and how can we help them get into this marketplace? The local infrastructure, we have our UAS testing consortium made up of our universities and the state government and selected members of our industry team. We unsuccessfully competed for one of the 6 test sites that the FAA put together, but we've been meeting with the FAA. They assure us that we continue to get certificates of authorization, and we're open for business. We continue test flying. We have an exhibit here this week with Georgia Tech Research Institute. We wanted to bring a couple of our companies with us, but they were test flying with our universities this week, so they're busy flying and doing some more research, so we couldn't bring them with us. And we have multiple test sites throughout the state. We have agricultural sites like you saw in the video. We have simulated urban environments, mock cities for public safety. We have down toward the coast, we have the flatlands, we have the mountains. So we have many test sites and many existing COAs that fit the needs of our researchers. The educational institutions, we think we have a great advantage there. We have Georgia Tech, the largest engineering school in the country, the largest aerospace engineering school in the country, but we have 4 other engineering schools in the state that feed into that system. We have Middle Georgia State College, our main aviation school, and it is poised, like it does for manned aircraft, to develop new curricula, to teach folks to be the operators and the maintainers of these vehicles. We talk a lot about the rules to operate. What are the rules to maintain these vehicles? Are you going to have an A&P license to work on a certified unmanned aircraft system? We don't know the answer to that yet. What kind of coursework will that require? So there's a lot of unknowns that we're working with the FAA, especially the Southeast Regional Office on, to help look forward and see what we're going to need to do to have that educational infrastructure in place. And customers, you need early adopters of any technology. That's one of the reasons we focused on agribusiness. The farmers that we've talked to see the advantage of this. They're already doing precision agriculture. They have tractors with GPS. They have autonomous tractors in some of the large farms. So this is an extension of what they're already doing in the ground vehicles, and they're very excited about this. We have many of the ag equipment OEMs that live in Georgia and work with us. We have the farmers and cooperatives. How are you going to operate these vehicles? Is it going to be the farmers themselves that buy these and operate them? That might be the case for large farms. But for small farms, that might not be cost effective. You'll maybe have companies that operate these and provide it as a service to the farmers. What will that business model look at? We're actively working with folks on that. So we have lots of customers in our agribusiness. We're about almost $80 billion in Georgia of agribusiness economic impact. So we have a lot of potential customers for these services in the state of Georgia. And finding policies and regulations. We need the FAA rules to be able to operate, but that's only part of the equation. things like liability, insurance, other local restrictions, the support you need. These things aren't going to necessarily be operating out of the airports we already have, or going to be the rules on that. We're working actively with our insurance community in Georgia. Atlanta is a hotbed for aviation insurance, so we've been working with companies there to have them on our UAS working group and our policy committee to be able to look at the issues involved with insurance and liability, and how do we develop that infrastructure that is at the state level insurance. And so we need to have that ready to go when the FAA rules finally come out. So we talk about the policy and the key to the future of the commercial market, the national policy. This is a little out of date. We've had the FAA designated test sites in December 2013. The FAA just announced, I think last week, their intention to have a Center of Excellence in Unmanned Aircraft Systems. We'll see more about that later this month and into May, and we're very excited about that. We keep anticipating a notice of proposed rulemaking for small UAVs sometime this year, and we're poised to be ready to respond to that and give our input at the state level, and looking forward to those UAS rules that will come out of that. And most likely will not meet the deadline. There's a lot of reasons for that, but we'd like to see 2015 because we have a lot of folks who'd like to employ these vehicles on a commercial basis. In our state, we've, like many states, there have been 30 states that have put some sort of legislation in at the local level dealing with unmanned aircraft system. In our last legislative session that just ended just a couple weeks ago, we had 3 different draft bills that came out and were discussed. We held a Unmanned Systems Policy Symposium in November, invited a number of our key legislators to that, and it was divided into 2 areas, ground vehicles and aircraft systems. It was well attended with over 100 folks there from the legislature, from our state government, from industry, from our universities to talk about the issues I talked about earlier about what do we need in terms of infrastructure. So we've had a very good conversation with our legislature. None of the bills passed the legislature this year. It was really too soon in our estimation. We think that as we see the FAA rules come out, then the next session next year may be the time where we have a little more discussion on that. But our legislators have been very good, asking lots of questions, working with us on that. So I think we have a great environment at the policy level in Georgia for this. So we have a team of 4 core people on my team, a bunch of other folks that we utilize in the universities to help work this issue. So we're continuing in Georgia to work this very hard. We work very closely with the FAA. We're here at Sun and Fun with an exhibit here in the FAA Center to talk about unmanned aircraft and their uses in the commercial environment. So we'd love to see you at our exhibit later, pick up some of the brochures about what we're doing. And we're very excited about the future of unmanned aircraft in Georgia. And as we say in the South, y'all come. We'd love to have you there. So that's all I have for you today. I guess I'm open for questions at this point. So.
Thank you. Great presentation. I'm wondering if 300 feet above ground level would be sufficient for most of these farm operations. You showed one, and it appeared the aircraft or the unmanned vehicle was no more than 300 feet or so above ground level. Is that a sufficient elevation, altitude to operate at?
That was one of the things we were looking at in this study of what would be the optimum altitude. That depends on the crop you're looking at, the type of sensor you're using. We looked at, in this particular test, we went anywhere from about 300 feet. Most of what you saw in the video was for the use of the video. Video's better at 300 feet than 700 feet. We went as high as 700 feet under the COA, and it's particularly looking at what is that optimum altitude. It has to do with the resolution of the camera, the number of pixels it has and what you can see, versus the time it takes to image an entire field. If you're higher, you can cover an area much quicker, but you give up some of that resolution. So one of the things we did with the farmers was look at what is that optimum, and the answer is it's going to be different for different crops. And the kind of sensor you use. Most of the testing for this one, I think, ended up around 400 or 500 feet. But again, that's something that we continue to look at.
The reason I ask this is that over unimproved areas, there's a 500-foot flight level for us pilots.
Yes.
And it seems to me like up to 300 feet over fields for field-launched vehicles, it would be appropriate to simply have the FAA extend a waiver. If you're over a private farm, don't go over 300 feet. Launch in the field, recover in the field. Why not just simply seek a waiver from the FAA for that operation? And then you would, of course, engineer to fly at 300 feet.
Right. Well, one of the things we have to do under the COAs is we have to provide information from our flight testing back to the FAA. So we do that. We have long conversations with our folks in the Southeast region about what we're doing with the flying, what lessons are we learning. That's why we think the agricultural side is going to be the easiest place for the FAA to start, because it is rural, because a lot of the flying you're going to do is going to be at low level. We think it's going to be below 500 feet, almost all of it, especially when you get into the application part of it, because we're actually looking at imaging is just the first step. Next step is once you have this imagery and you know that we have this huge field, but we know we only have a problem in this little corner of it. Well, the old answer was we spray the entire field. Well, that uses a lot of pesticide and it's very costly. But now we can use a small UAV and spray just the area it needs it. Well, that's going to happen at very low level. So applications can be at low level, imagery at a little higher level, and part of it will be that give and take with the FAA. The FAA says we'll let you go this high with potentially some waivers or other rules. Then we'll engineer within those boundaries. So this is part of the give and take. We say this works best technically. What can you give us, FAA, on the rules? And so this is this active conversation that we have back and forth on that.
Very good questions. Thank you, Mr. Justice. That was a very good presentation. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you for your time. Thank you. That wraps it up for today on our seminars. I hope you all come back tomorrow morning. We have our next speaker will be tomorrow's Friday, April 4th already, the Airman Medicals by Dr. Bailey Berry. He is the FAA Deputy Federal Air Surgeon, so please come on by. And the next event that will be coming up from 10 o'clock to about 12:30, we have the Wright Brothers Master Pilot and Charles Taylor Master Mechanic FAA Awards. And for those of you that don't know what that really stands for, they've dedicated their life over 50 years in aviation. They've been involved that long. So I hope somebody will step out and come by and see some of these folks that have done some long commitment within aviation. And then finally, at around 1 o'clock, we will meet the FAA, Doug Murphy, the FAA Regional Administrator from the Southern Region, and other FAA officials will be here. So please come on by, and thank you very much. Would you all mind exiting out to the door?